We are ready now to finish up with the Design Dojo main belts. This is the brown belt, level 7, dealing with topography. So a lot of this is going to be words you've been at least introduced to in some of the previous things like kerning, letting, tracking, left alignment, right alignment, justified, doing this thing called a widow, which we briefly talked about, how to type and have text show up just inside of a circle, creating outlines and what that does, and then how to warp some text before doing the final challenge. All right, let's get started down here on level 1. So just like we did in Photoshop, the way that you adjust kerning is this. You're going to go in with your text tool, and kerning is the amount of empty space between two letter pairs, meaning you've got the cursor blinking, you don't have it highlighted. So what you're going to do is this. Go ahead and come back here. You're going to press the Alt or Option on your keyboard and use your right arrow and move that back. I'm going to push that out a little ways. I'm looking at the one above to try to see about how much space to move in and out. And that looks pretty good. So I use just the Alt key. That's your kerning. Go ahead and do letting. So with letting, what you're going to do is this one's a bit different. Letting has to do with line spacing. Back in the day when they used printing presses, they actually had pieces of lead in between the lines. That's why they still call it letting. So what we're going to do, I remember letting for line spacing, L and L. So I'm going to hold down, I pressed Control A to select it all, or you can click and drag. Just be careful with clicking and dragging with the text tool because I want to show you in here again what happens. Right here, see how, look at the cursor. It's super small. There's a dotted line around it, but when I get close, see it disappears. If I click here, it makes a whole brand new text box. So that's why it's super important to keep an eye on where you're actually clicking. I usually come towards the center of the word. And then if I click a couple times, it'll select everything, or I can press Control A to select all. Once you have the entire paragraph or groups of words that you want to move, now you're going to hold down the Alt or your Option. And this time, you're going to press the down arrow. With the down arrow, that's letting me move that down. I can press up, and it brings the lines up, down. Looks like I want to get it about there, where the bottom of the G is kind of lined up with the top of the D. This is known as an ascender. It's going up. These are descenders, where they're going below the baseline of the text. There we go. That looks good. Let's go up here. Now, tracking. Tracking is even putting an even amount of space between all of the letters based on what the kerning already was. So like right here, I'm not real happy with that gap that's happening there. He left it way too big, but okay, I'll do it the way he's done it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come inside. I'm going to highlight that entire word. So with kerning, remember, kerning is only about changing the space between two letter pairs, and you don't have them actually highlighted. With tracking, what you're doing is you're saying, I like the spacing between here. I don't. That A and C is way too far apart. In fact, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to use the Alt key. I'm going to bring those back a little bit closer and push that one a little bit further away. So this is how I usually do it. I set up my kerning first. I get to the point where I'm happy with the spacing. And then if I'm using like a headline or an article for a magazine or something, once I have this set up spaced with the kerning the way I like, then I'll highlight the whole line. I'll hold down the Alt key and I will press my right arrow. And what that does is that puts even amount of space between all of the letters. That's a way for you to be able to put even space. But it all starts first with having the kerning set up right. I'm not sure why he left the kerning all janky like that. All right, let's do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move down, and I want to align all of this to the right-hand side. So this one's pretty easy. Going with the mouse, being careful not to create a new box, but to actually select the text. See a little symbol? I can highlight all of that. And up here in the top right, there's the paragraph tool. If yours isn't showing up, you can choose properties as well. Properties, once you have this lined up, this will change depending on what tool you have selected. So it gives you what it thinks are the most commonly used things that you would need, such as paragraph. If any of those aren't showing up, you can go to Window. And once you get down past tools, it's all alphabetical. And you can go all the way down until you find what you're looking for. So if you're looking for topography, it's all going to be in type. And then it's alphabetical inside of there. So you can choose paragraph. That paragraph panel of the top pieces is exactly what's here. And then these three little dots give you the other options that are in there. So these programs have a ton of different ways, like paragraph up here has the same things. So there's a million different ways to find where these things are at. So if you're not quite sure, you can always use the help to search for where the stuff is at. But usually most panels will be listed under Window, and then you can find them somewhere within there. All right, let's see. Yours might be looking slightly different too, because I have Essentials Classic turned on instead of Essentials. That just changes the workspace. So come on, there we go. So yours looks a little bit different. I like the Essentials Classic because that's the way that it's been since I've used it. And I like having this command bar and options bar across here. All right, right aligned. I'm gonna switch to my my regular selection tool. I'm gonna press the Shift key and the right arrow, and that'll move it over. The Shift key, when you're moving it, moves it faster. It moves at 10 pixels as opposed to 1. It's just a little bit quicker to move things. So that was the way to set up the alignment. Let's go to level 4. All right, so a rag is what this edge, ragged edge, looks like. So sometimes one of the ways to fix it is to justify the text so you can straighten up the edges. Notice here it's straight, here it's a little more jagged. So the way to do that is just come in, highlight your text, come to your paragraph, and these are different options for justify. This is going to left justify. This one will justify, but the last line will be in the center, last line to the right, or stretching it out. That creates the justified rivers, though, right here, that big gap. So that's why that one's not that great. You can click there, and that's how you can fix it. So use the left justified. Okay, so one of the common things that ends up happening here with paragraphs, this is what the college was going to mark stuff off on, is when you end up having what's known as a widow. It's where you leave one of your paragraphs or columns of text with only one word at the bottom. An orphan occurs when it's starting the top of a column of text with only one word. So widow is left at the bottom. Orphans are left up at the top. Kind of weird names for them, but that's just the way they call them. So with this, one of the things that you can do is you can start to pull this stuff up a little bit. Or what you can do is just shift. I clicked right here in front of the T. I'm going to do shift enter, and that'll move the thing down. But you'll notice it didn't actually fix the problem. So what we're going to do is this. We are going to start to click away. I'm going to resize this text box a little bit. And so notice as I'm moving this around, it's changing the amount of text, like where it's automatically wrapping. So sometimes I'll play around just to see, is this better? Is it better up there? Ah, that looks better. So you get that nice kind of descending rag on the left, on the right-hand side. Makes it feel a little bit cleaner. All right, let's go ahead and go over here. And one of the things, and it's super subtle, but so much of topography is going to be this subtle thing. I just clicked the wrong thing. Let me go up here. We're on 7. Is this idea of what's known as hanging punctuation. See how the little quotes here are kicked outside of, and I am zooming way too far out. Sorry, I had some things selected, so it keeps zooming weirdly. All right, there we go. Notice here, the quotes are lined up with this edge, and it creates this weird little funky gap, this little hole that's happening there. Whereas here, having the punctuation kick to the outside helps to keep the left edge lined up. So the way that you can do that is there are options to go in and be able to fix that. So let's see, we're going to highlight the text that's in there. We're going to go to type. Let's see if I can find. Oh, that's where the hyphenate is. Trying to remember where. There we go. Roman hanging punctuation. So I went to paragraph, click up here, and what that does is that kicks the punctuation to the outsides. Makes it feel a little bit better aligned. Okay. We're going to use placeholder text. Usually when you click, see how the lorem ipsum shows up. It's just fake text to make it look like there's actual real text. Because sometimes as a designer, you're not the ones actually writing the article. You're just laying out the pages. So you need something to use as a placeholder. So with something like this, if you click with your type tool, see there's all these different options. There's touch type and type on path and vertical type, area type. There's a whole bunch of different things with type. But what we're going to do is this. When I move my mouse inside of here, it doesn't actually fill with placeholder text. It just took that one line and started to fill with that line. So what we're going to do is we are going to select the frame. And with that frame selected, it's really subtle, but look at the shape of the dotted lines around this cursor. So I got the cursor, little dotted lines for a box, but when I go here, say it just changed to a circle. It's really small, and I'm pointing at my screen as if you can see my finger pointing, but it's not. It's when I move over the path that I click on that, and that strips the frame of the stroke, and it actually puts it so that the text is inside of that box. And I click away, and there is the text inside of a shape. That'll work, and you don't have to do this part, but I'm just going to make like a funky, that's really way too funky. Make a funky shape and show you how that would end up working. You don't have to do this part. I just wanted to show you. So I'm going to take my text. I've got this. Oops, I did not close the shape. That's part of the problem with drawing with it being on a fill. I would never really put text in this kind of shape, but right here, type. And that allows you to turn that into a shape which you can then manipulate any of these individual anchor points. Sorry, I'm clicking away too many things. It has, there we go. So when I click on this shape, I can now go in and manipulate the corners. I can go in and change the direction of stuff. So you can have it in an odd shape. It does not have to be a circle or a rectangle. You could put text to where it follows the path in any way that you want. All right, let's do these last two right here. So what we're going to do is this. See how he's created kind of a logo by extending this thing out. Rather than drawing new shapes on top of this, if we convert this to outlines, it will essentially make it look like it was traced with the pen tool. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to click on the text itself, not using the text tool, but just using the selection tool. And I'm going to go to type up here in the menu, and I'm going to do create outlines. And then I'm going to, over here in the quick actions, I'm going to ungroup. What this is going to allow me to do is now each one of these letters has individual anchor points that I can manipulate. Now, with that, what I'm going to do is I want to extend these two lines to move over to the L. So I'm going to hold my mouse button down slightly above so I can grab both of those. Now, if I use my right arrow and drag that over, then I can do the same thing over here. I click in the empty space and I click and drag so it highlights those two anchor points. Move those over. And then I'm going to do the same thing over up here. Click away in the white area. Highlight just those two anchor points in the white space. Highlight over those two and click at the edge. Now you could go in if you really wanted to and you wanted to change the shape of something here, you could go in and now that it's its own path, I could add in a new anchor point. You don't have to do this, but if you want to experiment, you can. I added in a new anchor point right there. And now I've just sharpened that edge. If I wanted to do the same thing here, instead of, I'm going to click here, instead of dragging to highlight this to move this forward or move this back, which I could do, I could also grab, instead of dragging, if I click on the entire shape, and as long as I have the white arrow, which is your direct select, I can now go in, come on, click away. It's just when you select this, see how it grabbed every single one of these individual anchor points as blue. If I click away and I come back and I click on just one of them, now that's the only one that's blue. Notice the rest are not. So then from there, I can start to move and manipulate these to create maybe my own customized text based off of that one. Oh, that's pretty hideous. But you can kind of manipulate your fonts so you don't have to have it be exactly the same thing. So some different ways that you can experiment, and the whole thing comes from creating outlines. And the last one that is going to be a step-by-step is this piece right here, where you've got this text, but I want to warp this text. So there's special effects you can apply similar to the filters that we did with Photoshop. What we can do is we can go to Effect, and there's Illustrator effects, and then there's Photoshop effects. I usually shy away for the most part from using the Photoshop effects. They're okay, but they're not that great inside of this program. There's some instances where that's not true, but from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Illustrator and I'm going to go to Warp. Now, the thing you have to be careful of, especially if you follow other tutorials with this, is there are some that are the same down here. Like, see how there's stylize and there's stylize. You really need to check to see, are they talking about Illustrator effects for stylize? Or are they talking about Photoshop effects for stylize? See, they're two different things. This is a common area that students get mixed up on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go to Warp. And I'm going to choose, I don't know, I think let's try Wave. That one's a bit different, but I'll show you a couple different ones and I'll let you experiment with what you want. As I'm dragging this around, it's changing the way things look as long as I have preview on. If I don't like that one, I can try vertical, try horizontal. I could try these different options that are already set. And the cool thing with this is once you click OK, it's still live text. So see when I move my mouse over it, it changes. So if I wanted to, I could highlight this word and type in text instead. And that warp effect is still happening. So it keeps it live. That's different than down here with create outlines. Once an outline is being created down here, I can't go back in with the text tool and select it. It won't let me. It's now a drawing instead of type. This is still live. So it's kind of like using a smart filter in Photoshop. It lets you go back and make some changes, which is kind of cool. All right, last one. Yay, you are finished with the dojo after this one. What you're going to do is this. You're going to go to layers, select that, turn off the visibility, go back to your type here layer, and now you are going to type on this path, and I'll actually help you with this. So type on path can be a little bit tricky. So I want to show you right here. I'm going to select this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that. So several different methods and ways to be able to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to select, and I'm clicking on the black line to select the circle. I'm going to hold the mouse button down on the text tool. And I'm going to choose type on path. And now I'm going to come over here and notice when I move, it's got the little wavy line next to it now. When I move my mouse over this, a tiny little pink path word pops up. That's when I'm going to click on it. So what it did is it just filled it with placeholder text. I don't want that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type along a circle, and I am going to show you a couple little pieces. This part gets a little tricky, so be careful with this. I'm going to choose my type on path. I'm going to change this from myriad bold regular. For myriad pro, I'm going to do bold, and I'm going to increase the size a little bit. So it's in the wrong spot. So I could just rotate the circle. That's sometimes useful. I could come here. Let me show you a couple of the pieces that are happening. See this line right there? That line right there is designating or showing you where your midway point is from the starting point of your text and the ending point. So for example, if I come here and I click on center, it's putting it exactly where that perpendicular line is. So if I drag that perpendicular line around, I can move this around. If I pull it inside, the text goes inside of the circle. If I put it outside, it's outside of the circle. But this is the part that I was talking about being tricky. See, it's bouncing around a lot. But I can move this and get that set. So the reason I like to use the center, whenever I'm doing circles, I like to center align things because then I can grab that little midway point to be able to drag that around. If I don't, here's the other way you can do it. See these two lines here? There's two squares. Stay away from those squares, but let's play around with these lines. I'm going to left align. This little line right here is telling me where my starting point is. So that's this one is my ending point. So I just separated that out. When they're together, it's really hard to see. But this is another way to be able to move your text along that circle. Now watch what happens if I get too close to that edge. The words start to disappear because this line is the starting of my line. That's the bottom. Let me show you how I'd set this up if I wanted to perfectly center it right across the top. If I knew it was dead center on this top. Whenever I'm dealing with circles, I'd take my ending point and I put it on the far right-hand side right there. I take my starting point and I move my starting point right there. And then when I get that little pink line that shows up, that's letting me know I'm centered. Then I just click center text. I think that is a much simpler way than trying to eyeball it and figure out what is working and what isn't. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit smaller. I'm not using the same exact font that he is, but that's fine. All right, so here's the part that's tricky. I can't put text on the same shape. So what I'm going to need to do is this. I'm going to hold my Alt key down and I'm going to drag a copy. I'm now going to switch to my text tool. I just pressed the letter T and I'm going to highlight my text on that circle. And I'm going to type in can be a bit tricky. Notice I did it in all caps. I want you to do the same thing. Now that that's here, I'm going to grab my perpendicular line. This is my center point, and I'm going to move it inside. And I'm going to drag it down here. I'm going to check to make sure my center line or my starting point is on the left. My ending point line, that one right there, is on the right. Then I'm going to grab the line. And instead of lining it up perfectly like that, because see, it doesn't look right, I'm going to use my arrow keys and drag it down a little bit. So now that line looks a little bit better. But if you're really wanting to be specific, actually, I'm going to just leave it like that. So you can have those two pieces. Now, if you want it to be perfectly centered at some point, let me know, and I will show you a couple other little things, because this part can be tricky, but I think that part itself is going to be the enough for now. And then go ahead and save that. And make sure, again, you change this to Illustrator CC, and it should be Legacy. Yours, again, might say 2020. It might say 2019. Don't give me those. It needs to be Illustrator CC, and it'll say Legacy next to it. So make sure you have it that way. I have a video in each of these that tells you that. All right, that is it. We're ready to move on to doing some cool designs.